Are you a mom who's looking for hacks to get off the hot mess express? Well, if that's you, you are at the right episode of the lifestyle.org podcast. Don't go away. All right, today I am with Nikki Oden. You are a wife, you're a mom of two, you're a lawyer, and you are a mom coach. So you are the perfect person for me to be talking to today.
I'm so excited to be here, Roy. Thanks for having me.
You bet. Now, you're a lawyer, and from what I understand, you were pretty busy as a lawyer and trying to be a mom at the same time. What was that experience like?
So at the very beginning, the only overlap I had with being a busy litigator and being a mom was being a pregnant woman. When I actually gave birth to my daughter, I made the decision that I wasn't going to continue lawyering. I had a very honest conversation with my husband about just not loving the stress and the environment I was in. And he so graciously offered to work so that I could stay home. So in the very beginning, I was a stay-at-home mom. I had gone from being a very independent, autonomous woman with a huge career to a woman who hadn't showered perhaps in a couple of days, didn't know when the last time she brushed her teeth was. And I completely lost myself in motherhood. It was one of those things where I thought, how hard can it be to be a stay-at-home mom? And I laugh when I talk about it now because it was most definitely the hardest thing I ever did. And then when my daughter was 9 months old, I found out I was pregnant with my son. And so that whole lawyering thing was definitely put on the back burner for quite a few years.
Yeah. Well, it's a full-time job. My wife and I have never argued about whether she works or not when she was at home raising our kids. We didn't want our kids in daycare. So my wife, who is a court reporting stenographer, she took several years off just to stay at home. And I never argued. We have a joke in my house that the definition of a husband is someone who takes out the trash and then acts as if he's cleaned the whole house. And that's pretty much how guys clean the house. But for a mom and a wife, you see things differently, and it bugs you when things are not clean, and it bugs you when things are not taken care of. So I imagine there was quite a transition for you then saying, well, this is my full-time job for now, right now. What was that transition like for you?
It was hard. I think it's not something that I talked about openly at first because I felt a tremendous sense of guilt. I felt like I should be more thankful and happier that I wasn't in court or at an office slaving away for 60 hours a week. I was at home with my children, but it was hard. It was hard, I think, both from the sense of trying to keep two humans from killing each other accidentally because they're, so little, they might fall over, stick their finger in something they shouldn't. Yeah. Also feeling like I needed to keep the household looking great because it was my job and I wasn't doing anything else. And I think as moms, we sometimes put a little pressure on ourselves there because we feel like we need to show something for all this time we're at home. And then it was hard for me just to give up all that independence and to not have something outside of mommy and wife that was really making my brain turn in ways that it didn't feel like it was at the time.
Yeah, you fall into a special category of women where you are business minded, you have dreams, you have goals that are occupational outside of the house. And I work with a lot of those. In fact, on my production staff, I have the most amazing women who are moms, but they're very career driven as well. And we talk about their struggles with trying to balance priority in their life, but at the same time, not lose their dreams, not lose their goals. And then in the life coaching aspects of my work, I'm working with celebrities and professional athletes, and they're extremely goal oriented. And yet at the same time, they don't want to lose out on the goal or the dream of being a great mom. Right. And so you're a special category that, especially the viewers who are watching this, are saying, yes, finally, I thought I was the only one, because typically it's the male who is goal-oriented and family second and all that in the way that they act. But I think you found some ways to help women not only to achieve in both worlds, having one foot on each side, but you've also helped to prioritize and reprogram what's necessary and what's not. So talk to me about what are some of the hacks that you found to just kind of help you feel like you're not losing either of those two worlds.
The first thing I had to do was give myself permission to really decide what I wanted. And I
Yeah.
think when you're living in those two worlds, it's really easy to get sucked into the day to day without pausing to really think about what you want. And what you want really should be the driving force behind everything you do, not what you should want or what other people think you should want. It's what you want. And I find with the moms I've spoken to that a lot of them haven't just sat down to think about, do I really want to go down this path with my career? Do I really want to stay at home with my kids? Or do I want something in between? What does that look like for me? So that was the first thing I did. I allowed myself to open up and receive what my heart was telling me versus just trying to stay in the day-to-day, get everything done, get up tomorrow morning, do it all over again without giving any regard to whether I was moving in a direction that I really wanted to go in. And once I did that, everything shifted for me. I was able to make small decisions every day that moved me in the direction I wanted to go in, be in a better mood about it.
Yeah.
And that trickled down into everything else I did. And I think that is what drives me so much with moms, and my passion for moms is truly we are the center of our household. So if we're not feeling joyful and peaceful and fulfilled, that is going to spill over into all of our other relationships and how we show up and whatever it is we're doing. And so that part of it was really key for me. And it's something that I really hammer home with all of my moms when we first start working together.
I love that. You take this in the positive way, but you are an overachiever because you not
Certainly.
only figured it out for yourself, but you're the founder of Your Ideal Mom Life. You're the host of Love Your Mom Life podcast, and you're also the author at, I don't know where you find all this time, but also the author of the new book, But Definitely Wear Mascara. How have you been able to find the time to not only figure it out for yourself, but now it's like you're really giving back to community by saying, let me help you moms. I went through the struggle. How have you been able to do that?
In really small bite-sized pieces. And I tell all the moms on the podcast and in my book, anytime you want to make a change or go after a big goal, start really tiny, itty bitty small with little steps. Bite-sized pieces that you're going to be able to sustain. I wrote my book in 30-minute increments before my kids woke up every morning. And little by little, it compounds and it turns into something that's real. And the same thing can be true of any goal, whether it's a fitness goal or a goal at work. You can take aside those little, pockets of time to work on that and being really intentional. I like to be deliberate and on purpose with how I use my time because it's so precious. And there are a lot of wasted moments in the day if you're not being intentional. So that's another thing that I am very passionate about relaying to other moms when they're trying to get themselves off the hot mess express.
I love that. You're owning your day, not letting your day own you. A lot of the people that I work with, we all have dreams and goals, but unless we're proactive in saying, these are the steps I can take today to get me to where I can take some steps tomorrow. We just become demoralized and frustrated. So it seems like you've just figured out, hey, these little, small steps or bite sizes, as you call them, are the things that will add up to feeling that forward momentum. There's nothing worse than feeling like there's no forward momentum in what you're trying to do.
Absolutely. I think the human experience is to progress. We all want to move forward. Yeah. And when you don't feel like you're moving forward, which is very easy when you become a mom, it's very easy to feel stuck. It is demoralizing and it's not a fun place to be.
Yeah. Well, we're going to put your website down in the description below. So definitely all of you will want to go to Nikki's website. Tell me about your website. What are some of the things, the resources that people can find there?
I have a blog on there with a lot of tips and tricks. And I have a big button that says start here. And I direct moms to different areas of the website, depending on what it is they're they're struggling with or what challenges they're facing and where they feel they're ready to go. So some might feel like I want to take a huge feel like I just want to do something itty bitty. So a free challenge called the Mom Life Challenge. It's a free 3-day email challenge that helps you with some of building some of those habits all the way up to a full-blown course and some other materials that can help.
That's awesome. And you also have a book, But Definitely Wear Mascara. Where did you get that title from?
So if you look at the cover, which you can find it on Amazon or Barnes and Noble, it's a photo of me pulling my hair out, and my children, they're my actual children in the photo, are screaming, fighting. And the thought is things might be crazy and your kids might be making you a little bit bonkers, but always take time to do something, no matter how small it is, that's just for you to take care of yourself. So for me, that's putting on some mascara. For others, it may be something else. But the thought is, don't put yourself last.
Yeah, I think it's important, especially moms are by far the most selfless individuals on earth, because you're the caregivers, and just to give yourself some self-care as well, I think is vital to have some balance.
Absolutely. I actually like to say harmony, because I feel like sometimes balance can put some pressure on us, right? It's to be at home just as much as we're at work. And realistically, it's more like a seesaw in my experience, where some days are work heavy and that's okay. And some days are family heavy and that's okay. And to give ourselves that grace of not having to be perfect.
I love that. Now, you don't say trial and error in your book. You say something else. What do you refer to trial and error as?
I say trial and improvement. It's the truth, right? When we make mistakes, we get better. We obtain information that we wouldn't otherwise have had on how to do it differently next time. Just like when a kid's learning how to walk. And we've all, as parents, had that experience of watching them struggle and letting them struggle, because we know that that's how that they're going to get better. And you can see like the little wheels turning in their head, where they're like, okay, that didn't work. I'm not going to try that again. And maybe this way will be better. It's no different as we get older. And certainly the problems are bigger, but the experience is the same. And I really want to encourage that mentality. I think especially as moms, we tend to be really hard on ourselves. We put a lot of pressure on ourselves, and there's tremendous opportunity to feel guilty or to feel like we're not good enough or we're not doing enough for our families. And we will make mistakes along the way. We don't know what we're doing all of the time, but that's how we learn and that's how we get better. And we can be there for the mom who comes after us. And in some cases, we can maybe get it right with the second kid when we have a similar situation.
Yeah, I've always told my wife our first kid's our experiment.
Right.
Luckily he never died. We were,
Luckily.
You just feel like this thing's so fragile. If you drop them or, change their diaper wrong, they're going to die. And you realize kids are pretty hardy. They're
very
fine.
resilient.
So by the second child, you're like, he'll live. He's good. No worries.
Sink or swim, kid.
Exactly. Now you talk about, you were just saying about, don't be hard on yourself, too hard on stuff like that. You say in your book, you need to talk to yourself in a loving way, like you would talk to someone that you love. You got to talk to yourself that way. What do you mean by that?
I think that so often our first thought when we make a mistake or we do something wrong is not very nice. And I would venture to say that you would never speak to your children the way you so often speak to yourself. And I was actually having this conversation with a girlfriend earlier. You probably wouldn't even say some of the things you say to yourself to someone you don't like. I mean, it would be incredibly rude. So why are we doing that? And I think that it's years of telling ourselves stories. I mean, how often do you hear someone say, I'm such an idiot, right? It's just almost a knee-jerk reaction. And in some cases, it's almost like we can't control the first thought. But our second thought, we should take responsibility for our second thoughts, because that's where, again, we can be intentional and really start to practice a new way of thinking and a way that is encouraging and supporting and loving of ourselves. Because again, when we are feeling joyful, when we're feeling fulfilled, it spills over into everything we do, our friendships, our relationships, and how we work. And our kids are watching us, that they're like little sponges, and they see everything. They watch the way you talk to yourself, and they watch when you go for a big goal and you're excited about something, but they also watch when you don't, and when you settle and you tell yourself you're not good enough, in whatever way you tell yourself that. Maybe you don't use those exact words, but they pick up on that stuff. And we work so hard as parents to encourage our kids, right? You would never tell your son not to try out for a sport because he might not make it or he might not be good. So what? You would still encourage him to try it. Yeah. So somewhere along the way, we lose that spirit with ourselves. And I say this so passionately because I have been there for years and years and years. And coming out of it is such a beautiful thing.
Yeah. Talk to me about that, because I know a lot of moms that I've worked with and people that I know, they get to a place to where the common phrase is, I just kind of lost myself. Mm-hmm. I just lost myself to being a mom, being a wife, being the caregiver. Talk to me about what is that consistent struggle that you've had and you've seen others have. What are the things that they lose and just kind of get stuck in this just kind of spiral of not really pursuing the life that you wanted to?
I think it boils down to identity and feeling a little bit like you're not sure who you are anymore. At least that's how I felt when I felt like I had lost myself. And I felt that way because I was becoming more to more people. It wasn't just about me and my husband. It was now about this human being and everything that came along with that. And I took on a tremendous responsibility and also perhaps put a little bit of pressure on myself to be everything to her and then to be everything to my husband. And then there was no room left to be what I wanted to be. It's exactly what you were saying before. I still had goals and dreams, but I wasn't honoring them. I wasn't allowing room for those things to flourish or even exist in my mind because I felt like, well, this is who I am now. I'm only Emma's mother and I'm only Sean's wife, which was not true. And I think it can be very hard to get out of that. And I've had the experience of speaking to some older moms who, once their kids go off to college, they've looked at me and said, I don't know who I am right now. I don't know who I am without this role to play. And they would give me some sort of words of wisdom or warning and told me, don't let that be you. Mm-hmm. Don't let go of who you were before you became a mom, because that girl is allowed to exist.
Wow. I think it's difficult, especially for people who aren't selfish. And, there are always, there's a whole nother issue where a mom won't be a mom because she's just caring about herself and her desires. But we're not talking about those people. No. We're talking about people like you and others who they're genuinely selfless, who are saying, I really have a responsibility to others that I put in front of my own desires, my own my own priorities of dreams and goals. And so we're talking about, the good moms, how that can turn into a bad thing. In your book, which I think is great because it has short chapters, and those of you moms who are looking for a book that it won't take forever to get through each chapter, Definitely Wear Mascara is the perfect book for you. In there, you talk about making yourself a to-don't list. Tell me about that.
Yes, it's a stop doing list. We take on so many things as moms, and a lot of times we're doing things that aren't serving us and that perhaps somebody else could be doing for us or instead of us. And I think we just need to be really honest with ourselves. Again, be intentional and deliberate with how we're spending our lives and our time and therefore our energy, and decide, what can I stop doing? What can I give myself permission to let go of? One of my best friends was recently facing this, and she was terrified to admit out loud that she didn't want to continue volunteering for something at her kids' school that she had committed to earlier in the year. And she finally realized, this isn't serving me. I'm almost depressed about having to do this. It's taking over my life. I don't love it. Yeah. And she finally put it on her to-don't list and said, this is not my best yes. So I'm saying no. And they were like, oh, great. That's fine. Thank you so much for the time you've given us. They sent her an orchid, and they had somebody else who it was her best yes, who wanted to step into that role. And that's the thing we forget. When we let go of things that aren't serving us, we make room for someone who really wants to do that thing or who'd be amazing at it and excel and grow in it to step in and do it. We can't forget that those people are out there and that the world's not going to fall apart just because we say no to somebody else and therefore say yes to ourselves.
Yeah. And these things that we have to say no to are things we'd love to do. In fact, they're really hard to say no because we'll miss them when we don't do them. But you can't do everything. I know in the business side of things, for me, about 15 years ago, I was incredibly overtasked at work, doing way too much. And so I decided when the VP came to me to say, hey, here's another idea of something we should do. I started this thing where I had made a list of all the things that I was currently responsible for and doing. And I took it out of my drawer, handed the list because I knew this conversation was coming because it had happened many times before. I handed them the list and I said, I would love to do it. I think it's important to do what you're saying, but I don't have time to do it. Tell me which of these things on this list that I should stop doing. And it was the most magical thing because they looked at my list and said, oh no, these are all vital things. You don't have time to add anything to your list. And so they went to somebody else and they had them start whatever the new idea was, because quite frankly, they understood I only had so much time and I was giving them more than 60 hours a week already. And so having a list of things that I was doing and asking them, what do you want me to no longer do, allowed them to understand in order to be, like you say, in harmony or balanced, I couldn't add one more thing to my day. And so I think moms need to also look at this, or stay-at-home dads, which is a growing group of people out there as well. You have to look at your responsibilities and say, if I'm going to add something to it, what am I going to mark off this list? And it really does help if you have a list.
Yeah, I think you have to frame it in the sense that if I say yes to this thing, what do I have to say no to? Because that is the truth. You're going to have to say no to something else. And is the thing you're saying no to something that's going to really help you? And if have an honest, frank conversation with yourself about what that would look like.
Yeah. Now, you also talk in the book about how to get stuff done when your kids are in the house. I would love to know your answer to that one, because I have, especially when our kids were real little, I couldn't get anything done. I couldn't wait to go to the office just so I could get some work done.
I know when I was a stay-at-home mom, like just stay at home, I was so jealous. I remember of the FedEx guy because he got to leave my house. I was like, I want to leave my house. So this came in great. Like this was very handy for me during the height of quarantine. But just really going back to some old school things that we used to do when we were kids that don't even necessarily involve an electronic device to keep them busy. So do you remember those games we would play? Like MASH was one of them, mansion, apartment, shack, house. And you would, it was sort of a fortune telling game that you could play and just determine like who you were going to marry and where you were going to live and what kind of job you were going to have. I pulled out stuff like that, chalk for the sidewalk with hopscotch. Now, these are all things that I would do with them. If I wanted to get stuff done without them, I would have to be really intentional about when I wake up, because a lot of times I'm getting stuff done in those earlier hours of the morning when they're asleep. Let's be real. Sometimes they're going to need you and they're going to be yanking on your sleeve. Mm-hmm. And if you don't want to feel irritated and interrupted, you're going to have to get some of those more important tasks done when they're asleep. Sometimes I would give them an art project. If you cover your counter with copious amounts of saran wrap, you can give them something to do unattended and you'll probably be okay. You can just rip the saran wrap off and throw it out. That worked really well for us. Sometimes it was a movie, but I would be within earshot just in case they try to kill each other over, who got to pick the movie, that kind of thing. But there are various tips and tricks in there on how you can get things done with your kids at home. And again, it's going to depend on the age as well. But YouTube fitness videos for kids are also a really good one. That'll keep them occupied for a good 15, 20 minutes. So you just have to be creative, but you can figure out a way to get some time to yourself.
That's huge, because I know most moms are like, well, when the kids take a nap, then I can get some work done. But I'm sorry, but most moms need a nap during the kids' nap time as well, because it's just, you're always on. So no, that's great. Giving them activities, giving them things to do, to be able to get something done around the corner. Yeah. I know my wife and I said our kids are before we had our first. We said our kids are not going to watch these little kids TV shows, definitely not going to watch Barney. And our first child came along, and the only thing he would sit still and watch, and literally was glued to, of course, was Barney. And so that was the half an hour every day
Never say
that
never.
while he's standing there watching Barney, we're like, okay, hurry, get something done, because he's hypnotized by the purple dinosaur right now.
Sometimes it's about survival in those moments, and it's okay. It's okay to let him do that for a little bit. It's not like he's like watching it all day.
No, definitely not. Now, you do this. You do this whole this whole program to help moms love their life. What have been some of the greatest successes that you've seen, or greatest improvements that you've seen in some of the people that you're working with?
I love hearing from people I've worked with that they're able to approach their mom life and even just their day to day with a different perspective. And one of the moms told me once, it was just something as simple as she had been meaning to pick out backsplash for her kitchen renovation, which was on hold because she couldn't pick out this backsplash. And she just never made the time to do it because she just felt like everything else is more important, everything else with her. Her business, her family, her boys, her husband's business. And she just never made the time to do this thing that would have made her really happy once, to get the renovation done. And she said, she sent me a testimonial, and she was like, because of you, I made this decision. I made the time. I put myself first. And now she's like, I can't believe the snowball effect and how good making that one decision made me feel, and how motivated I am to continue doing, like we were talking about before, the progress, to keep doing things that are moving me in the direction I want to move in. And so sometimes it's nothing earth shattering. Just like this thing that's been weighing on someone, or a mindset shift or perspective that starts this domino effect of making better decisions and choosing themselves, and all of the things that leads to it. It's incredibly rewarding.
I love that. That's really good. Now, what have been some of the surprises for you as you've just tried to figure this thing out for yourself? Were there some things that you thought would be one way, but then in practice you realized, wow, no, it's exactly the opposite?
I will say that building a business from scratch, and kind of like once I figured out what was working for me and I wanted to bring it to other moms, I sort of found myself kind of back in survival mode a little bit in trying to get a business off the ground, and like trying to the book out there, and having those sort of hot mess express moments again, where I felt like, wow, I thought I was over this, but I guess it's just part of the whole growth experience. We're going to continue to have obstacles and continue to have moments where we feel like we're not doing so great. But in those moments, I had the tools, and then I love being able to share those stories and just be real with people and let them know you're always a work in progress, and it's okay. Even someone who wrote the book on this has those days where she miscalendars something or doesn't show up to a meeting because she has too much on her plate. And that's a reminder for me to take a step back and practice what I preach and put things back in motion. And it's a really good reflection point for me to be able to say, okay, this happened. I know exactly why it happened. Here's where I broke down. Here's where I did something I knew I shouldn't have done by saying yes when I should have said no. And look what happened. Now I have information. I have more proof that I should not do that. And it was a really great learning experience for me. I'm sure it's not the last one I'll have, but I was surprised in the moment that I found myself in a similar situation just a little bit further down the road.
Yeah, and that's just human nature. I mean, we all, I think deep down we all know best practices and what we should do, but there's always other circumstances that are surrounding us and causing us to be inconsistent, and inconsistency breeds imperfection. And so of course, yeah, you call it perfect schmurfect in your book. But I don't think we're striving for perfection, because I don't think our kids need perfect parents. I think they need engaged parents. I think they need loving parents. But this myth of being a perfect parent, I think really drives a lot of moms into a state of dissatisfaction in their own job and what they've done, when the kids don't need a perfect mom. They just need a present mom, and a mom who consistently loves them.
I completely agree. And I think that perfectionism has its place in certain situations. And certainly if my child needed brain surgery, I would want the surgeon to be a perfectionist.
Yes.
Or if I needed to get handwritten invitations, I'd want the calligrapher to be a perfectionist. But allowing it to run on automatic and to rear its head in places like motherhood where it has no place can really rob you of joy and can keep you from celebrating small wins in your life because they weren't perfect. But there is no such thing as perfect in those situations. And you're absolutely right. Your kids are not looking for perfect. They are looking for someone to make them feel seen and loved and safe. And you can do that very easily without being perfect.
Yeah. I teach people to celebrate improvement because a lot of times we have such lofty goals that you have such a long time between initiation and celebration that you can't, if your goal is the only thing that you celebrate, then you get discouraged in the middle. And a lot of people end up, turning back just simply because they haven't got to that place of celebration. But if you can just celebrate the improvement, hey, look, I was able to carve out 5 minutes today, and next week I'll find 10 to be able to move forward into what I want to do. That gives you the celebrations that literally in your brain, those moments of improvement that you acknowledge, it actually releases the endorphins in your brain. It is the physical feedback to feed your body to say, you know what, that felt good. I'm going to do some more of that.
Right.
So I think it's really important for people to celebrate incrementally, not just the big goal of perfection of this is how I want to be. I think it's very important for people to understand just how your body is made to give you positive feedback, even from a endorphin, which is a pain reliever that's automatically produced by your body when you're celebrating something.
Right. It's also part of the habit loop. It's how we reinforce behavior. So we have to take moments to celebrate those rewards. I think also because that's how anything happens. That's how you get to from A to B. You don't just get there. There's a journey and there's a process, and it's absolutely okay to be excited about the incremental progress you're making because you can't get there any other way.
Yeah. So you went through this journey. This was not anything I'm sure that your husband and you talked about before you got married, that, hey, we're gonna go on this journey. What was his experience like? What were some of his challenges when you were trying to figure this thing out?
He has been so incredibly supportive. And I do have to say that I realize that has been a huge factor in my success. I know that things could have been a lot harder if he wasn't so supportive. And it kind of ties into that whole, you are the sum of the 5 people you hang around the most. And he's certainly one of the 5 people I hang around the most. And he is my biggest cheerleader. So it began with me telling him after we decided I would stay home that I didn't want to stay home anymore, that I couldn't do it. And me feeling the comfort and the space to be able to be vulnerable with him and honest with him. And I think for him, it was probably, not what he wanted to hear. I think that he wanted things to go more according to plan. He's definitely a planner. I joke around. If you look very closely, he's holding a clipboard and he has our whole life planned out. But he was very supportive, and he has encouraged me everywhere along the way. He shouts from the rooftops everything that I'm doing as I'm doing it. And as I'm having those incremental wins, he celebrates them. And so I think for him, it's been tumultuous, but it's been fun. And he absolutely loves being a dad. It's been a huge joy for him. We have a boy and a girl, so he gets to have both of those types of experiences with our kids. And I think he really appreciates what I bring in terms of the role I'm setting, the example I'm setting for our children, and also just the life lessons and the way I talk to them, the way I encourage them, and I tell them, you're gonna fail. If you didn't fail, you didn't try hard enough. Like, no one was saying that kind of stuff to me when I was younger. It was like, why didn't you get the A? Why did you get a B plus? I wonder where we get the perfectionism from, right? So I think he appreciates the work I've done, the work I'm doing with other moms, and how that's showing up in our family dynamic. And I think he's really proud of me.
Yeah, well, I'm sure he is, because you're doing amazing work. What do you think he would tell the other dads who are just on the cusp of the wife saying, "Hey, look, I want to implement some of these things Nikki's saying." What's the advice you think, or maybe you've heard him give to the other dads who are kind of nervous about transitioning?
I think that he would say, go for it. Just let her go for it. Just try it and see what happens, because it's probably going to be awesome. And he tells people all the time that he thinks moms, kind of like what you were saying before, moms really do a lot, and we have to give them the support and the credit they deserve. If we want to live, if he was talking for himself, if we want to live a happy life, he totally believes in happy wife, happy life. So he definitely perpetuates that. But he's seen it over and over again, because we're the center of our households. And if mama's not happy, it affects everyone else.
Yeah. I think it's such an important thing for us to all to be just planning and being very intentional about this home dynamic, because life has changed. I mean, in the 50s, the moms weren't outside the house working. They didn't have to, but our economy really changed everything to where, there are very few households in the US right now where it doesn't require two earnings to be able to afford the house and the kids and the private schools and whatever else is going on, and now the food with the with the inflation going on. So many people now, are looking at, how could I possibly run a house and my wife not be working in some way? And so I can tell you from my standpoint, when my wife and I had the conversation about whether our kids would ever go to daycare or not, it was just really clear to us that we'll figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
We don't need all these extras and the huge house and the boat and the trailer and the extra cars and all that. The most important thing for us to invest in this moment is these beautiful human beings that we get to in some way introduce into a world of possibility. And so I think it's really important for a lot of couples who are starting out to start having these conversations of, is it okay if we have to downsize our house, our cars, whatever it is, in order for us to spend the short amount of time? And it's really a short amount of time that you're raising these kids. Is it okay for us to sacrifice in that way?
Yeah, and when you talk about running a household, you really are running it together. So you should be having these conversations together and be on the same page about what you want your life to look like. And one of the things we started doing was we implemented a weekly meeting, because we were starting to feel a little bit, I think, of resentment, because I didn't know what he was taking care of and he didn't know what I was taking care of. And we both felt like we were doing more than the other person.
Yeah.
So we started meeting to open that line of communication. And when I tell people that, sometimes they're like, you meet with your husband? Like, that's so corporate-y. But no, it's like, we're a team. So we need
you
to
don't do it on
communicate.
Zoom though, do you?
No, we do it with a glass of wine on the couch.
There you go.
Yeah. But just like, who's on first this week? Who's doing pickup here? Who's doing drop off here? And how are we partnering? How are we doing this together? So nobody feels like, oh, I do everything. I'm doing more than you. Your life's so easy.
Yeah.
That just doesn't happen with us. And it's exactly like what you're saying. It just be open and honest about what your roles are going to be, what that's going to look like. And are we both okay with this? Not like I'm telling him or he's telling me.
Yeah. It really is a partnership. They have to do what my wife and I started doing years and years ago, because there is this issue of, what do you do all day? No, what do you do all day? And so we actually, through Apple's iCal on all of our devices, whenever I'm doing something, I have a meeting or I have a recording or filming or whatever, my calendar shows it, but my wife has her own calendar and it's in my calendar as well that we're subscribed to each other. And I see what my wife is doing, and it really helps us because there are times that we have to figure out the kids need to be picked up from school, but one of us can't be working at that time. And so it allows us to proactively say, hey, I understand you're busy. And we can see in in color on the screen when we're free and when we're busy and what we're doing. So that really as well helped as a communication piece with my wife and I to just communicate, because when we sit down, we'll be like, oh yeah, I've got this and that. I always forget something. My wife tends to forget something. And then we're like, oh yeah, in last minute, I also have this today. I forgot I was going to do this as well.
Yeah, it's a great thing to start a habit to start implementing as a family. Like even when I'm planning out meals, I tend to be the cook, but he grills. When I'm planning out the meals, I sit down and do that with him. Like, what nights are you home for dinner? What nights can you cook? It's a total partnership. And that really helps, I think, us both, not just in our attitudes toward each other, but in the smoothness of how we run our home.
I think it's important. A lot of couples don't understand that the value of role expectations, like who does what, and just the fact that you're sitting down with your husband and even talking about what meals you're going to be home ahead of time. I mean, it's so proactive compared to how a lot of relationships are. I know there's sensitivities based on, let's say, for example, how a wife thinks her husband expects her to be, or the role that she fulfills, and dinner should be ready, and she shouldn't be asking him, are you going to be home, here or there. But I think it's so valuable for these couples to have these conversations of, this is my role and that's your role, and anything in this realm is your domain, anything in this realm is my domain, but I'm still going to have your input to see, do you like this or do you like that? In our house, anything outside the house is my domain and I'm responsible for. But that not only includes the yard and the hedges and the pool and the hot tub and the solar and everything at our house. But I always have to ask my wife, so what do you think? I don't like this area. We want to put some plants in there. And my wife I go into this whole conversation of what we think would look best in the space. And it's very rarely the same thing that we want there, but it is a partnership that at the end, we're both going to be happy if we spend a little extra time and figure out, well, what is something we both like for that. And inside the house, that's my wife's domain.
Right.
And because it's my wife's domain, whenever I do something that has anything to do with cleaning in the house, boy, do I get a lot of markers. I really fill up the love bank there because it's her domain. And vice versa when she does stuff outside. It's so I think role expectations really allow a mom or a dad or a husband or wife really to just kind of relax into, you're doing enough, you're doing great, you're overseeing it and making sure things are getting done on a consistent basis. And so I think it actually lowers the stress when people really delineate even the small things of who takes out the trash.
I agree.
And stuff like that.
Removes decision fatigue.
Yeah, absolutely. I see a lot of moms in that position of, if I don't say something, if I don't initiate this conversation, it's not going to happen. So I hope all the dads out there watching as well really understand that the power of this dialogue, of communicating together as a team, just to take that pressure off of so many moms that have to not only deal with overseeing the house, but have to make all these extra decisions too. Why do you think when we get in the car and the guy says, where do you want to go eat? The wife says, I don't care. It's because she's tired of making decisions all day.
Totally. But then you better choose the right place.
Oh yeah. So no, I figured it out, Nikki. So I give options. Are you more in the mood for this, or this? And I'll say 3 places. And then it opens up to, I'm not really feeling that. So now I'm narrowed down to 2. So I can't go too wrong with a decision between 2 places. So typically I give like 3 different options that are like totally different types of food. And then and then we don't drive around aimlessly with our $5 a gallon gas out here in California.
Right. You've got it down, Roy. From experience how to do it.
Absolutely. Now, you in what you're doing. You really try to help moms also understand that you don't want people to fall into this guilt of not doing everything perfect. You yourself have figured out a way to get back into the workforce. How have you been able to do that and not feel guilty that, okay, now I'm getting back into work?
I choose not to feel guilty. It really is that simple. And it comes down to the first thought may be, oh, I'm not a good mom because I wasn't there for that. But then I rein myself in and I say, second thought, like, my kids know how much I love them. I show them how fiercely they are loved. And I'm there for the big, important things. And if I have to miss one or two other things, it's okay. They'll be okay. Yeah. I think also I sort of eased my way back into it. So they got used to seeing me go back to work and they're proud of me. So that was another thing that I really, I like allowed myself to notice, that they're proud that their mom works, and they tell people my mom's a lawyer and they think that's really cool. Like, they're still at an age where I'm cool. Yeah. And so I kind of like take that in as fuel, as I'm setting an example, and they realize that I'm doing something that's for me, but also for them. So I also like to correlate for them. Well, if you want to do this extra thing at Disney, mommy's got to go to work. That's the way things are. Yeah. Money doesn't grow on trees, to which I get, well, money's made out of paper, and paper's trees.
Made out of trees.
Right.
There's a few steps in between, kids.
Yes, just a few.
That's good. Well, in closing, what's one of the most consistent bits of advice you're finding yourself over and over again with the moms that are coming to you? What's probably the most consistent bit of advice you're having to give?
The most consistent thing is to take some time for yourself every single day to do something that's just for you. And even if it's just 5 minutes, you take the 5 minutes. I think the biggest resistance and pushback I get when I say that is, I don't have time for that. Must be nice for you, but I don't have time for that. And my response is always lovingly, yeah, you do, girlfriend. Yeah, you do. Yeah. You can find 5 minutes just to breathe, close your eyes, and take some time for yourself, or to read something, or maybe just do burpees for 5 minutes. You get a workout in and you did something for you. But whatever it is, make sure you're taking that time to spend on just you, so that you can be the best version of yourself when you walk out and head into the rest of your day.
I love that. That's powerful advice. I want all of you to make sure and go down to the description below and get Nikki's book, and also check out her website for more advice and ways to help you totally be enjoying the mom experience, and understand that that there's advice out there that can help every single situation that's out there. Thank you so much, Nikki, for joining us on the lifestyle.org podcast.
Thank you so much, Roy. It was so much fun to be here. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. Great. And for more content like this, definitely go to lifestyle.org. Don't forget to smash the subscribe button and the like button so you can get more content like this. But go to lifestyle.org. You can find other podcasts just like this, broadcast TV shows that will help you live your best life possible, and blogs that can help you in all areas of your life to make sure you're living your best life. Thanks so much. We'll see you next time.